Okay, welcome back to NostalgiaCast 70s Palooza. I'm Darin,
And I'm Jonny.
and today we'll be covering the 1973/76 faux documentary slash video essay F for Fake by little known director Orson Welles. Again, starring Orson Welles, starring Francois Reichenbach, starring Elmire de Hory, starring Clifford Irving, starring Oja Kadar, a whole bunch of people that you've probably never heard of. Anyway, so like we mentioned in the last episode, this was I've done more deep dives, like studied essays and studied articles on this movie than I have actually than I'd seen the movie. And so it occurred to me, like as I was going through our 70s list, I was like, well, I really want to do this. I was like, have I? And it was like again a Better Off Dead situation where I swore that I'd seen it, but I was like, you know what? I don't think I've seen the. I know what the movie is, but I don't think I've actually seen it. It's just a weird, kind of jumbled brain thing. Anyway, what was your experience with F for Fake? Probably none, right?
Well, no, I had seen the thumbnail on
Okay,
HBO Max or whatever it's called now.
right.
So I'd seen it as I was scrolling through things, but never really taken the time to investigate it. And then you mentioned this. Oh yeah, that I remember seeing that. So I went when you mentioned you wanted to do it, I went and watched it right away.
Wow. Okay.
But I fell asleep at the last 20 minutes of it. I just, and I woke up and went, oh crap, I gotta watch it again now.
To get to that point.
So, we watched it again just the 2 days ago. So.
Okay, kind of get it fresh. So again, just that we mentioned briefly because I know we covered Orson Welles during our Transformers the movie episode, which is not the way that you kind of want to cover Orson Welles. I don't think like that was he was barely involved in that. I mean, he was just basically doing like work for hire stuff like commercials and radio ads. And when he talked about Transformers, he just said, "Oh, I play a big toy that eats smaller toys." I mean, that's he didn't really take it seriously. It was just kind of like he did in his later career. He was just doing these little teeny side projects to fund his own personal projects. I think Transformers was one of those. But and we touched on briefly in that episode that Orson Welles might actually be my favorite all-time director just because of how I don't know, like brazen and how there he is. Like he's even though his career was like crumbling and like after Citizen Kane, he didn't really have the same kind of control over anything. But I always say that Orson Welles, when he's operating at 40%, his 40% is miles better than most directors' 100%. I don't know if that makes any sense. Like when he's barely has the facilities to make a movie, he's still got more invention and more style than a lot of directors have when they've got full control. It's amazing kind of watching him. And so I did want to talk about that. But what is your Johnny? What was your experience with Orson Welles? I mean, obviously, Citizen Kane, you've seen that. I
Yeah.
mean, what's your
Well,
opinion on him?
I'm not very well versed with Orson Welles. I was aware of War of the Worlds, the radio show that he put on back in the day.
Yeah, yeah.
I know about that, and I think I've heard portions of it or bits and pieces of it. And I've seen Citizen Kane maybe a few times. I know
Mm-hmm.
I watched it with you once, and I
Yeah.
watched it with another one of our friends once, and I think I just seen things here and there. So I like Citizen Kane. I thought it was a really good movie.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good things going on there. And I do agree with you that he definitely has talent. I see it. It's apparent right away. You go, okay, he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I've seen the opening scene of Touch of Evil, but never the whole movie.
Okay.
And so I need to watch more of his movies. Oh, I have seen well now F for Fake, and then I've seen the Other Side of the Wind.
Yeah, just barely released on Netflix,
Yeah,
right?
and then the Love Me When I'm Dead. So I watched that documentary.
Okay.
Yeah, which is about the other side of the wind.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, too, like, because you and I talking about, we'll probably bring up Shakespeare a little bit later, because in our Shakespeare in Love episode, we did talk about authorship a little bit there, which kind of ties in with what F for Fake is all about. But, his Shakespeare adaptations, like his Othello and his Macbeth, and you've heard me talk about Chimes at Midnight, which is probably my favorite of all of his films, which is a tall order when I say that Citizen Kane is probably the best made film of all time and how influential it is. But Chimes at Midnight is just an amazing piece of work and how it combines 5 different Shakespeare plays into one cohesive story about Falstaff. It's an
Hmm.
incredible an incredible experience. And that was what Wells did. Like, he was a showman. Like, if you were to look at his history, and like he had a love of theater and a love of acting very early on. I know his dad became famous for inventing some kind of bicycle lamp, and so he was wealthy, and he just didn't work. And then his mom was really into music, and so Wells was studying music for a while. And then when his mom died, he kind of quit that music thing and lived with his dad, who was a drunk. They traveled kind of Europe, like the Far East and stuff like that, or Jamaica. And then when Wells came back to the States, like I think he joined a seminary where his love of like theater and acting was fostered, and he worked on radio. And so he, from a very early age, probably like 6 or 7, like you could tell that he was just above and beyond like what a normal kid was at.
Yeah.
And so what made him famous? Like, obviously he rose in the ranks, and he, like you talked about in F for Fake, he talks about when he was 16 and he graduated from seminary, he went on kind of a painting tour of Ireland, where he walked up to the Gate Theater to the owner and said brazenly, "I'm a famous Broadway actor."
Yeah.
And the guy, like, obviously didn't believe him, but was so impressed by this kid just telling him to his face like a lie and believing it. And like, he auditioned for it, was impressed by it. So he invited him in, and he did some productions. And just by doing that, just by being so brazen, a young Wells was able to get his foot in the door. And so he rose in the ranks. And then in 1936, because he started making behind the scenes stuff, he made an adaptation of Macbeth called Voodoo Macbeth. Have you heard of this?
Mm-mm.
Where back then, like, black actors were not allowed on stage, like major productions. And so again, the thing with Wells is that when you tell him something can't be done, his attitude is, "Oh yeah, I'll make it happen." And so this he was very into civil rights and that kind of thing. And so when this black actress, he wanted to get people working, so he did an adaptation of Macbeth with an all black cast. And he changed the setting of Scotland to like a fictional Jamaican island or something like that. And he changed the Scottish witchcraft to Haitian voodoo. And so he was able to just change the format of this play, like a lot of people, you see them do that with Shakespeare plays now, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it became very striking, was very popular, and got him a lot of notices, and was just very, again, very talented. And then and he was only 20 years old when he directed this major play that got him so much attention. 20 years old, man. He was like a genius. People already labeling him as that. And then in 1937, he did an adaptation of Julius Caesar called Caesar, which he did. So in high school, I remember for a competition, and you were there, and I think you helped coach me. Like, we did a scene from, I think it was Julius Caesar or Hamlet or something like that, where we changed it to businessman. Do you
Yeah.
remember that?
It was Julius Caesar. Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
it was.
And this, instead of the knife, it was a pen, and so we changed it to that. So it was kind of the same thing for Caesar. He did an anti-fascist, because Hitler was on the rise. He did like an anti-fascist version of it, where he just had the stage. There was no curtain. They painted like the bricks in the background all red. They dressed in like these, the Gestapo kind of outfits. And then, so again, when this debuted, it blew everybody's minds because it was so striking, like a modern version of Caesar. And so again, he's just rising in these ranks, and that's what got him to start the Mercury Theater with John Houseman. That's where War of the Worlds came in. And again, so he's doing all these things to change how we look at theater, how we look at radio. With War of the Worlds, you said that you've listened to a little bit of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And like, Wells is all in there. Like, it's very innovative. And at the time, some of the stories are exaggerated, but the way he structures War of the Worlds, he structures it like, okay, so it's a radio program, like you're listening to a band play. And then as they're doing it, every now and then they'll be interrupting with these news flashes of this thing that's going on in these hills, kind of like a few miles away from New Jersey or whatever. And they start like, and so, okay, we'll come back, and they go back to the band playing, and they'll do that, and then they'll cut back. So they keep cutting back in with all these reports of this. It turns out to be an alien invasion. And so what was fantastic was, when people would turn to the radio stations, like at the beginning of War of the Worlds, they flat out say, "This is a Mercury Theater production of War of the Worlds." But because they did it so realistically, when people tuned in after that intro, it seemed like a real thing that was happening. And so people started panicking because they thought there was an alien invasion.
Yeah.
And it created such a splash that Wells had to apologize. but you can tell in the apology, like in the broadcast, like he's obviously very proud of himself. And I think that's, that's one of the things that I find so fascinating about Wells is that he bought his own press. I don't know if that makes any sense. Like you can tell, like he loves the sound of his own voice. Like the last
Yeah.
half of War of the Worlds is just him monologuing for a good half hour. And you can tell that he loves his voice.
Well, he does have a good voice. He's got
Yeah,
like a great resonance. Like it just sounds good when you hear it. You're like, it's pleasing to the ear. And so I understand why he would like his own voice. That's
right.
funny though.
Well, that's the thing. Like Wells, a lot of the drawbacks to him is he comes off as very pompous and very pretentious and very know-it-all and very, I'm better than you. Like he has that attitude about him. But what's crazy is he has the talent to back it up. You know what I mean? Like a lot of
Yeah.
people, when they're brazen or when they're pompous like that, you look at their work and you're like, what? Like this is like this is like crayon drawings. Like you don't have the right to talk so big. But Wells consistently has the talent and has the mindset where it's like, well, you're pompous, but like it seems like you've earned it. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. I do agree with you. While watching F for Fake, at the beginning it was very interesting, and I was on board with it, and I was like, okay, this is going somewhere. This is intriguing. I was liking what I was seeing, and towards the end, I kind of started going, why is it becoming more and more about him? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and I started thinking, man,
Yeah.
and he even says like he even calls himself pretentious in that movie, and I was like, yeah, I agree with that. I was like, you are pretentious.
Yeah. Absolutely. Right. I mean, he's the funny thing is like he'll own up to it. Like he calls himself a charlatan. He calls himself a fake. Like he's more than
Yeah,
willing to buy into his, persona and say that he understands. So he's very self-aware, but he's also very a good promoter, I guess you could say, like the ultimate showman.
yeah,
So again, we're talking like the radio programs. He broke that mold. When RKO after War of the Worlds signed him to this contract, again, he's not even 25, I don't think, by the time he gets signed to make Citizen Kane. And they're already giving him final cut. They're already giving him full creative control, a major studio, and he'd never made a movie before. How crazy is that?
yeah.
and
That's
and
crazy.
that automatically started people like back talking him and resenting him because where did this kid come from? I've been working in this industry for 20, 30 years, and this kid comes in within a year or whatever, and he's able to make his own movie. Like obviously people were resenting that.
Yeah,
But again, with Citizen Kane, his mantra is he didn't understand that there were limitations to what the camera could do. And I think when I watch Wells movies, so he did Citizen Kane, which obviously broke, no matter what you think of the movie itself, like he basically wrote the rules of a lot of cinema with that movie. It's crazy to think, and he got in trouble for it because of the elliptical narrative, because of the showing. He would cut a hole in the floor and point the camera up so you could see the ceiling. But again, he'd have to put like cotton ceilings because that's where the microphones and
and
everything
the lights and
and the
everything. Yeah,
lights. Right. And so he was just innovating all these things. And then Greg Tolan, obviously the cinematographer, they did this thing with deep focus where you could see stuff in the background as well in the fort, which was unheard of or hadn't been used as much as they used it here for a visual storytelling. I don't know if you remember Citizen Kane. My favorite shot in that movie, it's a shot where you see Charles Foster Kane basically signing away his legacy. And so you see this fireplace in the background, and so he's kind of center frame, and you have these two guys that are surrounding him that are the people signing the contract. And so what happens is as he's signing away his legacy, Kane walks backward, and it turns out that the fireplace is actually a giant fireplace in the background. And so Kane walks back away from the camera, and you see him become diminished in the frame, and everything's in focus. But again, what that shot is telling you is that he's literally signing away his legacy. He's signing away his importance, which is again represented visually. And again, I don't think stuff
yeah,
had been done like that before,
yeah.
and it's constantly happening in Citizen Kane.
Yeah, I remember while watching that movie thinking every shot was perfectly composed, like everything. Like it was like, is there going to be anything that's not done perfect? Like
Yeah,
where's the mistakes? Where's the flubs? I didn't see anything like that, and that's why I think it's so impressive because like the rule of thirds is followed to a T. Everything is, like you say, the focus, the composition, just the lighting, and the way he used the camera in that movie. It's just, man, it's brilliant, and it's so fun to watch.
yeah, and it's alive. right?
Yeah.
You watch, like, I completely understand what you're saying about F for Fate kind of becomes more and more about him. We'll talk about that obviously in a little bit, but that beginning, like, it's like visual jazz. How the editing is so quick, and it's just it edits, it cuts when you don't expect it to, and it keeps happening, so that your brain is constantly working to keep up. You know what I mean? And that's what Wells does. Like, he's so ahead of the game that when we watch a movie today, it seems very modern. Like, for his Lady in the Shanghai that he directed in 1948, I saw a clip on some kind of clip show, and I could have sworn that movie was made today. It is so,
Hmm.
you know what I mean? You could tell a
Yeah.
movie's made in the 40s versus now, but the way he shot and structured his shots, and the way, obviously the design of it, it just looks very modern. So thinking 4 steps ahead, it makes it so that it doesn't date. You know what I mean? And
Right.
it's crazy. But again, with Citizen Kane, I think he started off so high, and because of the William Randolph Hearst thing, like, obviously, Kane is kind of based in part on Hearst, the magnet or the publisher, but Hearst became so obsessed and so upset that he tried to ruin the movie's potential. He tried to ruin Wells's career, and it worked to a degree. And so Wells kind of hit that high, and then everything. I don't think he hit those highs ever again, because he
There was
was
no place to go but down at that
no,
point.
right, which is what he says in the movie again, right?
Right.
But even then, like Magnificent Ambersons, which RKO famously took out of his hands because they went so much over budget, because the studio head had left. They took away his final cut, and so when he was making a movie in Brazil, they took Magnificent Ambersons. They cut like 40 minutes out of it, and they reshot the ending without his permission. And the thing with Magnificent Ambersons too, which again you should definitely watch,
Okay.
even in a truncated form, it's still amazing. Like, you look at, I guess the common comparison today is Zack Snyder's Justice League, how they took that out of his hands and they reshot stuff. When you watch the 2017 Justice League, it's a terrible watch. You can tell it's been messed with. You can tell there's no voice. You can tell there's no personality. But with Magnificent Ambersons, it's a different story. It's still incredible to watch. It's still very innovative, even though they took it out of his hands and kind of made it kind of a simpler kind of thing. And it's the
Yeah.
same thing with Touch of Evil, like you talked about. When he was making that in 1958, Universal, even though they were pleased with what they were seeing, they thought it was too out of its time. So they took it out of his hands there too, and they recut it. And then in 1998, Walter Murch, who we talked about for Return to Oz, the famous sound designer, he was able to take Wells's 58-page document or memo, like how it should have been shot, and Murch is able to rearrange Touch of Evil into its current form that we have. But again,
Okay.
Touch of Evil, even edited, is still amazing. There's so many shots and performances, and the story is so great. And then when you see the re-edited version, it's even more amazing. So
Oh
I don't
wait,
know if that makes any
I've I,
sense. He's
I've
just incredible.
I've seen the end of Touch of Evil because I've seen Get
Get
Shorty.
Shorty. There you go.
So I've seen the end of it. Yeah.
But again, as Chili Palmer says of that movie, it's like Wells didn't even want to make this movie. Like, it was a studio thing. Like, Charlton Heston kind of, I think John Huston was supposed to direct it. And when he bowed out, like, Charlton Heston was like, "Well, Orson, you direct it." So he wasn't even planning it. So it's not a passion project from him. And this is what I'm talking about. Touch of Evil is still incredible. Like, Wells took it and he made it his own thing. And it
Hmm.
doesn't feel at all like a work for hire.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep using comparisons. Like James Cameron, like, his only work for hire thing is True Lies, and when you watch that movie, you can tell it doesn't have his same. It has a lot of the same, like, action beats and the same creative prowess, but you can
Yeah.
tell something's a little bit off. So that's what I'm talking about with Wells. Most people who are compromised, most other directors who are compromised, you can tell that they are. But Wells, he, like, I don't know how to explain it. He, like, overwhelms that. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy. Like, I think his mantra in directing is director handles accidents. Like, if something bad happens on set, like, a bad director will just kind of kowtow to it, but a good director will use it, or a good director will find a way to integrate those mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that.
So again, this is just it's incredible. So even his Shakespeare adaptations, like Othello, which he made from 1949 through 1951. So whenever he got a chance, he would be shooting other movies like The Third Man or something else, where he would take his funds and he would use it to make these. So Othello, man, absolutely watch that one. There's obviously some controversy where he's in blackface, but you can't ask an actor to stay with a production off and on for 3 years. I think that's why he made that. Especially when you look at Voodoo Macbeth, like I don't think the accusation of racism kind of stands with that. Again, I'm not going to tell anybody else what to feel, but Othello has the shot design and the black and white cinematography. Every shot, just like Citizen Kane, and once you see it, Johnny, you'll agree with me. Every shot pokes you in the eye. They're so sharp and so angular, and so shadowy, and it tells everything through visuals. And Chimes at Midnight is the same thing. The way that he was able to combine the five Shakespeare plays just to make it a Falstaff centric kind of story, and the battle sequences. And again, even though he made that under duress, and there's obvious audio visual inconsistencies, there's doubles used, like you can tell that there's some like amateurishness because he didn't have like all the facilities to make a perfect movie. But again, even with all that, it's still an amazing movie. I All his movies, I could just go on and on about how great they are. Like The Trial that he made, which is probably his most other than F for Fake, his most controlled. And he made that in the 60s. That's a very like giant kind of production that doesn't feel like it's hamstrung by anything at all. But hopefully, Johnny, you're making a list of things to
Oh, I
check out,
am.
because these are,
Well, yeah, Chimes of Midnight for sure. I want it. That sounds interesting to me. I want to see that one. And would you
yeah,
say the other one was yeah,
the
Othello and
Othello,
Macbeth. But what about the what's the other one you just mentioned?
the
Trial?
the
Trial.
Trial, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely, with Anthony Perkins. Like absolutely
Okay.
watch that one. I think you'd really like that one. It's really funny. It's like it's kind of like it's the closest I've ever seen to a nightmare in feature form.
Okay.
So it's you'll understand it's crazy. But yeah, all these things, I don't know, like he's like we talked about, he's a showman, he's very pompous, and all this is just a long-winded way of getting to F for Fake, which again, he took, and then I want to get your opinion on this about
Okay.
what they were doing, but he took the documentary form, and he again, he wasn't happy with where it was. So he did something, or at least he tried to do something different. I mean, what you said before we recorded that it was a very different kind of take on of a documentary. What did you
Well,
mean?
yeah, when you mentioned it was a documentary, and I realized what I was going to be getting into when I started watching it, um, you realize pretty quickly that this is not a traditional documentary. You know, like it doesn't do it in the same linear format. It doesn't kind of like
Yeah,
just start have a beginning, middle, and end. This documentary, it jumps around, and he tells you, "Hey, we're going to do this on purpose." That's how it was revealed to me. It was very, back and forth, and things were revealed different times, and we got
yeah,
information as we got it, and we had to like. So anyway, I understand why it's so jumpy and choppy and everything, but if it had been told in a traditional sense, I might have understood what they were trying to tell me better. But because it was so jumpy and back and forth, and they would talk about Elmire, and then they'd talk about Irving, and then talk about Howard Hughes, and then about Orson, you're like, who am I actually supposed to be like? What's the story about? Like, who's
yeah,
who's the most important person in this story? And I think it's Elmire when you look at when you sit back and look at it, right? Because he's the painter who's the biggest of the fakers. I mean, they're all fakers, but what I'm saying is, like, if it had been told like start to finish, and it would have made more sense to me. But because it was so jumpy, it was like, yes, it's engaging, but it was still kind of like I had a hard time wanting to keep watching, even though I was like interested. Does that make
yeah,
sense?
yeah, absolutely. And again, when you try to innovate, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it's better to maybe just do the traditional thing. You know what I mean? To make it easier to kind of process. But again, that's not Wells. But I
Yeah.
understand, absolutely understand, because again, by the end, that whole last section, the whole 17, I love how he says the first hour is going to be complete facts. Like there's no lies. But there's no timer. He doesn't tell you, okay, the hour is up. It just keeps going. And then it gets to the point where it's like, oh, yeah, by the way, I told you everything was going to be truth up to a certain point. The
Yeah.
last 17 minutes, I've been lying to your face. Like this,
Yeah.
everything has been made up. So again, it's for people that don't know, again, what he did is he took the, what Elmire Dihori, right? who is a very famous art forger who could forge that's a talent, right? He was able to forge Picasso or I'm going to mess up all these other names, but he's able to take all these famous painters and just on a whim like make a painting in their style, and it would pass muster with the
Experts.
authenticators,
Yeah,
with
the
the
experts would
experts.
think it was, legit.
They would study it and they'd be like, oh yeah, this is definitely a painting, right? This is definitely a painting by the famous painters here. But it's so as he's basically doing this, and then the another filmmaker named Francois Reichenbach, he had actually shot a bunch of stuff with Elmire, and so Francois basically told Orson, well, why don't you take this and make it? And so Orson took some of the footage that Francois shot, and then he shot more of his footage, and the other footage that he was shooting, or some of the footage that Reichenbach was shooting, included this author named Clifford Irving, who had written an autobiography on Elmire called Fake, right? And so as they're filming this on Elmire and they're doing all this, it turns out that Irving had faked an autobiography on Howard Hughes.
Right.
And so Wells is like, what? And so he went back and he reshot more stuff to integrate that into the plot. And so now it becomes about a forger who's being studied by another forger who's another fake, right? And Howard Hughes is like, I've never heard of this guy. I've never met this guy. And so it turns out that the whole thing was just faked. And so it leads Wells, like it's funny, like you start off with one subject, but you end up finding something else that interweaves, and then it becomes something whole like different. And
Yeah.
then Wells, you're right, I thought it was interesting because Wells all of a sudden makes it about himself. Like he starts talking about his career, like with Citizen Kane and War of the Worlds. And what I like is that he kind of says, well, I'm a faker too, like I can't lie about, like, War of the Worlds, I faked an alien invasion,
Yeah.
so I'm a fake too, right? And then he starts talking, well, what is authorship? Because when you look at a painting by Picasso, and there's that quote, like somebody showed Picasso one of his own paintings, and Picasso's like, oh, that's a fake. And the guy's like, Picasso, Pablo, I watched you paint that yourself. And Picasso goes, yeah, but I'm just as capable of painting a fake Picasso as another guy. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Is absolutely like, oh, you're right. Like sometimes you're just not in it. Like you're not proud of that. That's I think that's what he meant, but it's the
Yeah.
same, you know what I mean? And so it just becomes this whole thing of, does it matter who the author is? Like going back to Shakespeare in Love, we talked about like the signature and is the Stratford upon Avon thing.
Hmm.
Is Shakespeare real? And at the end of the day, what did we decide?
I forgot.
We decided it wasn't the author. It doesn't matter. Like
Right.
it's the
Right.
plays, right? So that's the thing. It's like art is art, whether it's fake art, whether it's real art. Like it's art. Like what's people appreciate it for that.
Well, that's what I thought was so impressive about the Elmire part of the story was that this guy is such a talented painter that he can forge these masterpieces and pass as masterpieces, but yet he can't do something of his own that people want to buy. But they'll
Yeah,
they'll buy all of his fakes and he'll make money selling fakes, but that he won't be able to sell anything that he created, on his own, which I thought
right.
was really interesting.
Yeah, that's crazy. But so the thing is, like, the thing that I thought was really interesting about the structure to this is it's not so much a documentary as it is like a visual kind of an essay, which we see video essays all the time now on YouTube. They're like a dime a dozen, like thousands of video essays. But the question is like, how do you like structure it? And so looking at like the classical structure of an essay, you look, there's three different segments. There's pathos, there's logos, and then there's ethos. So my notes here. So pathos, what that is it's an appeal to an audience emotion. Okay, logos is an appeal to authority and credibility, and then the ethos is an appeal to logic. So all those three things have to be part of an essay.
Okay.
So how Wells does it is he takes the pathos, which is basically he's very upfront and he's personal. Like when he talks, he's talking to you. He's very charismatic, right? Like Wells is like, well, here's what happened and all this stuff, and he takes you into the editing bay, and so he shows you putting this movie together, and he's just very open and just very like
Transparent.
transparent. Like he tells you everything, right? And so he's appealing to you. So that's your in because he's talking to you as a person. He could be very pompous and talk, oh, my art, like kind of, but he's like, well, he's funny and he's kind of self-deprecating. So that kind of
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
the logos, which is what he uses like the fast, innovative, and like editing. And I think what that does is it mimics Elmir's kind of jet setting lifestyle. You know how exciting it is to meet like a famous person, and so when you're hanging out with them, everything seems to go by so fast and it's so choppy. And I think that's what the editing is kind of mimicking or trying to copy.
Okay.
But then what Wells does at this point is he keeps telling you that I'm a fake, I'm a fraud, like I'm a charlatan, I'm a magician, right? Acting is basically a form of magic, and so he draws you in that way too. Okay, so it's showing you like the kind of the authoritative kind of. So Elmir kind of demands or commands a room, right? But Wells also commands a room, and so the last part, which is the ethos. So here's what it could have done. Like the essay could have just focused on Elmir, and it could have just followed him around, and then him realizing, oh, I'm fine. Like I'm never going to be like you said, I'm never going to be able to sell all my paintings, right? I'm like on my own. So that kind of thing. But it could have been that. But instead, Wells kind of keeps us interested. So instead of it just being about Elmir, now it becomes about Irving, right? And how he becomes a fake. So again, a faker covering a faker. And then Wells goes into like his own, like we said, with War of the Worlds and stuff like that. And then Citizen Kane and all this stuff. I thought it was interesting being a faker that all the like the vocals from War of the Worlds, those don't come from the actual play. Those don't come from the actual radio play. He actually had them redone. So everything, there's nothing original in the reenactments of War of the Worlds. It was just done for this particular movie,
Hmm.
right? But it's like, so I thought the part that I thought was really interesting because he's talking about fakers, and then he starts talking about Hughes because Irving did that fake autobiography. And I like the part where he talks about like Hughes went to Vegas and he disappeared. And did he grow the long hair? Did he grow the long fingernails? And because we're all wondering and we're all feeding into these the rumors, we become kind of like the art experts, right? We become the what's the word that you use for them? The I think it was,
Experts. Yeah.
yeah, just the art experts, right? We become them. We're validating stuff that we know is maybe not true. So we're kind of making the rumors about Hughes into fact, even though there's no fact to back it up. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
I just thought it was a really interesting point that he's able to take that and go, well, the art experts, they think that they're expert, but they're either willfully missing information or they're just not as expert as we think they are. Right. So
Yeah.
he kind of ties that into people who look at Hughes and kind of feed into those rumors. Um, so
Well,
again,
wasn't there a moment where they said they didn't even think that could have been Hughes on the radio, like they
yeah,
are on the phone, whatever it was,
yeah,
that interview? It might not even have been Hughes.
right. Because he
They
was
didn't
using
know.
doubles,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
nobody, it was all part of this kind of persona that he was building for himself or something like that. And so, and then it goes to the whole thing with Picasso and his Oja or whatever. And
Okay. Yeah. I thought that was the weirdest part of the whole movie. I was like, what are we doing here?
yeah, I think what he's doing at that point, and again, it goes on for a long time. You know how he kind of adopts because what it is he and again, he doesn't tell us. Like he tells about Picasso and how this Oja could, which at the beginning, because we see like she had planned this whole thing where she walks in the city in a short skirt and high heels and gets these guys on camera like gawking at her. They don't know
Yeah.
that they're on camera, which is funny. Again, it's all for the she's claiming authorship over herself, like and kind of forming like a narrative around her just walking down the street in a way.
My wife commented on that opening scene. She's like, what are we doing here? Like, what is this? And I was like, you'll see.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, how did that tie in for you? How did you like? What did you think about
Well,
the
I
whole
remember
beginning?
her being in the other movies I saw, those the Other Side of the Wind and the what's the other one called? Love Me When I'm Dead.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, she's in those. And he talked about that when he introduced her, that, oh, we know from this other movie that I was making.
yeah.
Anyway, I don't know. Like I didn't really appreciate the last 15 minutes or so with the Picasso inner reenactment things with her. It just I don't know. It didn't make sense to me. I was like, I didn't understand why use her. Like why use her for this? I don't get it, but maybe there's a reason. Maybe you can tell me what the reason is, but I didn't get it. I didn't see what was so fascinating about her playing
Right.
Picasso. Was she playing Picasso or Picasso's grandfather? I don't know who she was even trying to be. Well, what was the maybe you just explain it to me. I don't understand what I was watching there.
Okay. Well, again, it's all about authorship. It's interesting because Oja had planned that whole thing at the beginning, like that was her idea with the people gawking at her, and then the part of the end, making up the Picasso story, that was her idea. And so Wells is able to write it in. But again, it's about authorship. When you see like her walking at the beginning and she's like an object, like again, she's an object in the last story, it seems to me, right? But again, it's like the whole story is, Picasso was on vacation somewhere and kept seeing her like sunbathing and kept seeing her walking past. And so he invited her in, and nobody knows what goes on and behind the closed doors, but he was able to paint like 22 paintings
Picasso
of her.
invited Oja Cador in
Yeah, because
for real? Like that really happened?
no, because what happens is at the beginning, Wells is talking about, oh, this woman, like, and but you see her when Wells is doing these magic tricks, right? She's
Yeah.
commenting on it as it's going, but he basically says, oh, we'll come back to her. Like it
Yeah,
doesn't,
yeah, I remember
we
that.
don't
Yeah.
know anything about her. We're just saying, oh, this is a, this is just a person, and we'll come back and we'll tell the story. So the whole thing about her having an affair with Picasso was, again, it was all a fake. That's
Okay.
all just a story that he concocted.
Okay.
But so again, like with these 22 paintings, and then she took the paintings as kind of payment, and so Picasso found out later that like she'd opened an art gallery with and so he's furious and he walks in, but it turns out that none of the paintings that he drew, that he painted, were in this kind of this display. And it turned out like her grandfather had painted like Picasso paintings and claimed them as his own. And so then he thought, oh, I'm famous now because I've painted Picasso and I've actually started you on another whole another level or another different like movement of your career. Like I should be credited for that because people are thinking these are Picasso paintings, right? And so it doesn't matter who the art of the artist is. So yeah, it kind of loses the thread, and I absolutely see that, but it ties in with that idea of authorship or who can claim what. But
Okay.
I think the problem with that ending is it goes on for so long, and you listen to Wells again. It's the War of the Worlds thing. You at the end of War of the Worlds when he's monologuing, you can absolutely tell that Wells is just in love with the sound of his own voice, and he
Yeah.
just loves hearing himself talk. And it's the same because it's him doing most of the talking. Like Kodar like interjects every now and then, but she's mostly there as an object,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
So I understand the point. Again, it's very elliptical and it's very kind of thematic, and it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't work like a regular essay. It doesn't tie like
Yeah.
a regular documentary. It's more like an essay or kind of. I think what Wells is doing is he's just spinning his own tale,
Yeah.
right?
And that's when it lost me though. Like that's when I lost interest and I kept like checking to see how much longer the movie was going to be. I was like,
Yeah.
when's it going to end? When's it going to end?
Well, I did that same thing. I don't know if it was because I realized, oh, is an hour gone by? Like, when are we getting to the point where like it's going to be, like we're going to
Yeah.
find out that the whole this part has been faked or whatever? Where's the twist or whatever? And that didn't really happen. It kind of gets to the end, and then Wells is like, oh, by the way, I lied to you. None of this was real. Good evening. And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he kind of leaves it at that, right? Um, but I think again, it's just really interesting the idea because he started off with the Elmire thing, and then it spun into the Irving thing, and then it spun into like his own history thing.
Yeah.
It was just a comment on that about how like we tell stories because as a filmmaker, he's a liar, right? He's basically doing the same thing. He all of a sudden he makes a movie at the end where he's acting as the grandfather and she's acting as Picasso. And so it becomes this whole second level. So I get the point of he's doing, but I understand what you're doing. It kind of loses the thread and you kind of like start checking your watch
Right. Right.
because it goes on for so long.
Can we address the monkey? Like the monkey was so distracting.
With Irving, that
And
was just
yeah, and
hanging around
when he
Irving.
started picking at Irving's sideburns and eating things out of his sideburns, I was like, what the heck is going on here?
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
like, I have that note here. I was like, what's with the monkey?
And they just kept like showing it once in a while. Like I shot the monkey like doing something. It was funny.
Yeah, maybe just to keep you on your toes, kind of thing. But again, it's when he talks about the cathedral of Chartres, right? I love, and again, it kind of lost me there. I'm like, what's happening? Why are we monologuing about this? Like, why are we, because he waxes poetic again? It's the in love with his own voice kind of thing. But I love the idea of there's no signatures on this cathedral. Somebody had to design this. We
Yeah.
don't know the name of the person that did this. All we know is that the cathedral is there and it's a beautiful piece of art, right? So at the end of the day, what does it matter who did it? Like, obviously, there's some kind of personal. I like what was the quote in there. It's like, if a person doesn't have something personal to say, what is he trying to communicate on the canvas? I'm kind of paraphrasing there, but it's the same thing. It's like, where's your personal I don't know. Does that make sense? Like, where's your
Yeah,
personal
yeah.
perspective?
Well, one thing that I thought while I was watching this movie was Elmir's, a forger, and he's a really good forger, and he made a career out of it. And there are people like in the music business that are make careers out of being in a cover band. They play other
Yeah.
people's music.
Yes.
So, but they make a career out of it because they're really good at it. I went to the Texas State Fair in Dallas when we first moved here, and there's a band playing, and they're just playing covers. They played Journey, they play like a bunch of things, really recognizable songs, but they did it so well. I was like, wow, that was really, really good. Like you could, if you didn't know it wasn't Journey, you wouldn't know it wasn't Journey. You know what I'm saying?
Huh.
Like,
Yeah.
but it was so well done. And I was like, that's pretty cool that they can actually go out, make a living, performing other people's songs and, you know, make money doing it.
Right. And it's the same thing, right? Like Elmira is making money off of this stuff. Like obviously people bought the Irving autobiography or were invested in
Yeah.
that kind of thing,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, it's just a fascinating. It's weird because it's not like watching a movie. You know what I mean? It was like there's so much to parse out, and there's not really like a lot of like narrative that we can follow because it's so like all over the map, like you said,
One
right?
thing I didn't really like was all the freeze frames because
Yeah,
I mean they were kind of interesting because they freeze people's faces in really weird poses and things and expressions.
yeah,
So it was kind of funny to like look forward to the next freeze frame and what they're going to be doing with their face. But again, it was kind of like okay, enough with the freeze frames. Like
yeah.
that's enough. I've had enough of it. You can stop
Yeah.
now. So
Very
anyway,
very 70s, very franche, you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
So yeah, again, there's so much to deep dive into this. There's so much to kind of pull away from it that if you have a negative kind of because again, when it was set for release in 1973, but it wasn't released in the US until 1976. And
Hmm.
then when it opened, it confused critics, it confused audiences.
I can see why.
Yeah. And when you're talking to Wells about it, he really thought he was onto something. He really thought he was making something that was very innovative. Like he was going to grab back that the appreciation that he had when he first started out. Like was going to get him back on the map. And then it didn't happen again and again. It must have been crushing for him. But again, it was like, well, same old, same old. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's what he faced like his whole career.
One thing too that kind of stood out, and I think it's just because of the way that Wells speaks, like he would speak through his teeth, like he wouldn't open his mouth very wide. And so I kept thinking the audio wasn't synced correctly. So I
Yeah.
kept thinking, is something wrong? Like, am I not? Am I not? So I'd like pause it and try to go back and watch and see if I could sync it up again. And I realized, oh, that's just he's not opening his mouth. He's just
Huh.
talking like this when he talks, so you don't see his mouth move. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, that's what's going on. Okay, I get it now. But it
Interesting.
was, I thought it was a mistake. I thought, what's going on here? But anyway.
That's just how he talked. Huh.
Yeah.
Well, though, I guess the last, I'm looking at my notes here, and I think we've kind of covered mostly everything. But the last thing I wanted to maybe talk about here is this. This is the last movie. Again, Other Side of the Wind was kind of cobbled together from other footage, and they found
Mhm.
all this stuff. So he wasn't directly involved in that, other than the filming of it. F for Fake was the last movie that he actually completed. Everything else that he tried to do after, like, never saw the light of day. It never completed fruition, came for that kind of thing. So this is the last thing. So it's interesting watching this movie as kind of maybe not so much as a remake, but maybe a pseudo remake of Citizen Kane, because it has the same kind of ideas. It's not the object that makes the man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's all the things that make up the man. And again, when you see Elmire burning the paintings, it's very reminiscent of Rosebud when it's in the fire, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of that kind of ties in. Wells doesn't go into it when he's talking about, because he goes and talks about Citizen Kane for a little bit, how it was originally a Howard Hughes biopic, that kind of thing, and then it ended up changing to Hearst and a bunch of other things. He doesn't really go into it, but when Citizen Kane, obviously, it made such a stand. In 1971, the critic Pauline Kael, have you heard of Pauline Kael? Read any of her
No.
work? Probably one of the, if not the most, next to Roger Ebert, probably the most famous critic of all time. I think she's actually my favorite critic because she's just, when you read her, it's her. Like, it's not like the typical movie critic thing where it's kind of a pompous, kind of over explaining the film. Like, she's just very like off the cuff and so when you read her reviews, it just seems like it's like just coming fresh out of her brain. It's not really, it's this, what's what I'm looking for. It's just very fresh.
Okay.
Anyway, but she wrote an article called Raising Cain in 1971 that was published in the New Yorker, where basically she ripped Wells apart. It was focused on Citizen Kane. It was basically existed that she wanted to bring out the fact that Wells was not the actual author of Citizen Kane. It was Herman J. Mankiewicz. And again, Fincher just made a movie called Mank, the
I
movie.
saw that
So,
one. I
okay,
saw that one.
about that. So I still haven't been able to check that one out yet. But again, she basically says that it's actually Mankiewicz that's the sole author. Like Wells wasn't there. Like they had interviews with Mankiewicz's secretary. Wells wasn't there for a lot of it. It was Mankiewicz that wrote all of it, and like Wells kind of directed and showed up and did all that, and then kind of tried to steal the credit away from Mankiewicz. And so that was the whole point of her art, and it damaged Wells's career. It damaged his reputation. It kind of hurt him. So he doesn't go into it in F for Fake, but he kind of touches on it. What's interesting, this is what I thought was really funny, because Elmire's a fake, and then Irving turns out to be a fake, and then he starts talking about Citizen Kane, which after this article was published, that Kale published, all these other scholars and film experts came out of the woodwork, like Peter Bogdanovich. There's a guy named Robert Carringer. Um, I think he was a professor or something like that. Anyway, so they started coming to Wells's defense. Bogdanovich basically recorded an interview with Wells where Wells says that, oh, we both wrote the script. Like I wrote some, and then we met together. We wrote it, the first draft together, something like that. And then we separated, and I wrote some, and then Mank wrote some, and then I combined and threw out what I liked and what I didn't, and what I liked I had in there. I included in the movie, and so he has audio of that. And then this Carringer guy was able to go to RKO, and he found an actual day-by-day documentation of the script writing process for Citizen Kane. And so it turns out Mankiewicz wrote either first or second drafts of Citizen Kane. It was called American at the time, and it was like a 250-page
Yeah, I
script.
knew it was a big one. Yeah.
Yeah, they had to whittle that down. So that was from March to May of 1940 when they wrote those two initial drafts. But because of this research that Carringer was doing, it turns out that there were 5 additional script drafts that were written after that Kale either didn't know about, or she willfully didn't include it in her essay to kind of punch up a point. But these 5 additional drafts are proven to be written by, or at least edited by Wells, or you know, or futzed with in any case, because in June of 1940, Mankiewicz was actually on assignment for RKO writing a script for another movie. So he was off somewhere else while it's documented that the script was being rewritten and messed with or restructured in Hollywood, where Wells was. So it's actually proven that Wells was working on the script. His secretary says, I actually took dictation from him. He was always writing. He was always updating. But the kicker for this is that Kale contacted a UCLA professor named Howard Suber. Suber was actually writing an article on Citizen Kane at the exact same time that Kale was. So Kale approached Suber and says, look, I'm writing this article for a book that's coming out about Citizen Kane. What if we include your essay and we'll split the earnings? Okay, we'll split the earnings and we'll have both of our essays, and we'll just add more fuel to the fire to help with this book. And so Suber's like, sure. So he gave her his manuscript where he interviewed, like, again, Mankiewicz's secretary, Mankiewicz's wife, interviewed editor Robert Wise, who later went on and directed Day the Earth Stood Still, or Star Trek The Motion Picture, West Side Story. Anyway, so they have interviews with him. And so Kale took this research that Suber did, and she didn't talk to any of those people at all. She integrated those into her own essay and took credit for this guy's research. So Kale comes on to kind of disprove Wells as the author, and it turns out she does the exact same thing. She's accusing Wells of doing.
Yep.
She accuses him of faking his way through this, and she fakes it herself.
That's funny.
Okay, so a story about a faker that ends up being studied by a faker, and then a movie that Wells makes turns to be studied and kind of messed with by a fake. So again, it's just this weird kind of
Yeah.
circle that's going on. Again, Wells doesn't do the petty thing and basically call Kale out. But again, the point I want to make is, even though Kale is obviously a fraud with this article, she still has those other reviews that I love reading. You can still feel, and those can't be fake because those are just coming from her it. Like, she's just writing as she's thinking. And so that's still the same thing. It still has other art, even though she's still a fake here. It's the same thing of like separating the author versus the art.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense. What do you think about all that?
Well, that's pretty funny that it just goes in this big circle like that. But I think that's pretty true to life. Like people fake it till they make it all the
Yeah.
time. I mean, yeah, I mean,
It's not a rare occasion, right?
yeah, yeah, it happens all the time.
Wells
So,
discovered this for himself, like he's with Elmira and with Irving and now with Kale. It's
right,
like, I don't
right.
know. There's just all these circles within circles, wheels within wheels. It's F for Fake is just a fascinating kind of experiment. Even though it's not entirely successful, I don't think it's entirely successful for what it's trying to do, even though I understand what a lot of the points it is trying to make. Because again, it does lose us in those last 15 minutes, but all about authorship. It's just an
Yeah.
interesting
Yeah,
idea
it's a
to
very
read.
interesting topic, very interesting, and the characters are interesting, but I would go back to yes, it's unique the way he put it together, and I agree with you. It is kind of fun to watch, but I prefer the traditional documentary style storytelling. I love watching documentaries.
Yeah.
And in fact, I watch those more than I watch narratives now. But I want the beginning, middle, and end. I want the journey of the documentary rather than you know, just the jumping around that he did in this one. But still, I mean, it was fun. It was still
Yeah.
good.
At least it wasn't like a 3 hour kind of fake
Yeah,
document. That would
that
have
was
been
actually
something.
nice that it wasn't. I was like, oh, good. It's not going to be like a long 3 hour Susan Kane type experience.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was pretty short, but even at the end, it did get kind of tedious. But still, it was interesting.
Right. Yeah, it's just fascinating to dive into. I'm glad I was finally able to watch the
Yeah,
movie instead of just reading or watching essays about it. Anyway.
yeah.
Okay, so I'm looking through my notes. I don't think I have anything else on it other than I don't know. I think Wells might be my favorite all-time director. I just think
I thought you said he was your favorite human being.
favorite human being. Yeah, there you go too. It's just I I get the criticisms of him. I get that he's kind of a pompous ass. You know what I mean? I get
Yeah,
that. But again, everybody's feeding into it. When he's sitting at that dinner table and everybody's just staring at him in awe, it's like, you can't accuse this guy of being pompous and then stare in awe at him and make him think that you're in awe of him. You know what I
that
mean?
was the first time my wife said, "How pretentious is this guy anyway?" When he's sitting
Yeah.
there and he asked to have the crab taken away or
and
whatever
to, and to
it
bring me a steak, you know
was.
what I mean?
Whatever it was.
In the middle
Yeah,
of the points that he's making.
yeah.
It's
She's like,
just,
"Why are you watching him have dinner with people? This is weird."
yeah.
But
But again,
still,
it's
I get
it's
it.
it's all about it's the showman in him. He's just
Yeah.
a natural, probably our greatest showman. I don't know if that makes any sense. He's just
Well, he
I
definitely has talent. I mean, you
yeah,
can't deny that. So,
right. And it was kind of fun watching him peak early, and then again, when he's at 40%, still better than most people at 100%. I don't know if there's
yeah.
another director I can say that about. Okay, so that was F for Fake. So Johnny, it's your choice next time. What are we doing for our next episode?
Okay, well, we are going to have a guest, and this is a guest that, he visits our podcast often. So we're going to have Jason Payne visit us one more time, and he
Uh,
chose The Black Stallion.
well, at least he picked a good movie. I guess that's going to be that'll help kind of help get through the
Well,
pain.
I know you hate him, but, we got to get past this hate
that'll
thing.
that'll muscle through it. Okay, yeah, Black Stallion. I think that's 1979. That's another
Right,
Coppola production, not directed,
right.
but he produced it,
He
right?
produced it, right.
And yeah, maybe one of the
So
most
we'll
beautiful
definitely
films.
have some things to say about this one.
Absolutely. Okay, so Black Stallion for next time. Until we see you, I'm Darin.
And I'm Johnny.
And just remember, I can paint a fake Picasso as well as anybody else.
Yeah, I know I can't.